Welcome, Bob. So excited to meet you and to talk through all the aspects of your MBA profile. What we're doing here is talking to MBA candidates and really trying to help them strategize for maximum success in the MBA application process. You can think of this as like a profile assessment, but it's really much more than that. We're just going to roll up our sleeves and see what we can actually do to help advance your candidacy in this short conversation today, so that as you go forward, you're better off, you feel prepared to tackle the challenges that are coming your way. So today we are talking with Bob. Bob's favorite school is Tuck, but he's also looking at some other top 15 schools. Here are Bob's baseline statistics. He went to Liberty University, 2015, majored in criminal justice, 3.35 GPA. His career primarily has come up through law enforcement and church leadership, and he's still working on the GMAT. We'll talk about that today. So our goal is to get Bob into Tuck and some other schools. So let's see what we're going to do to make that happen. And I first want to share the framework that we're always talking about at Career Protocol. If you've gotten your MBA Mo report, if you've spent any time on our website, you have seen a version of this framework. Because when you're approaching MBA admissions, your statistics are really only about 20% of the entirety of what they're evaluating. And the rest of these pieces, your career progress, your school fit, your passion, your character, these are in a lot of ways even more important. And how they come across to the school really depends on how you communicate. So that's where conversations like this can add the most value, because we can really dig into like what you've done and help you put that forward in the most inspiring way. So let me go back to the form that you submitted here.
Sure.
And so I have all of your information. I'm trying to think of where to start the conversation. This is our first one, so I'm not really sure where to start. Let's do this. Why don't you start by introducing yourself at the highest level? We already looked at your statistics, so just kind of give us the overview of your life story and what leads you to want to transition to business school right now.
Sure. So again, my name's Bob. Correction. My name's Bob. So it's a pleasure to be here. So to kind of give you a background view of my life. I grew up in the Midwest. My dad worked for a Fortune 500 company, and growing up, we would move every 2 to 3 years. And I had the opportunity to experience different portions of the country. Really fell in love with what my dad did, both in what our life looked like, but as well just in the day-to-day, right? And so later on in life, my dad transitioned into ministry. I grew up later on in the Mid-Atlantic region on the Eastern Shore in Maryland, and then later went on to college in Virginia, obviously, like you saw, Liberty University. During that time, I met my now wife, which is super exciting. Also had a love for law enforcement. So I ended up studying that, had a lot of mentors who really poured into me, and that led me to walk into law enforcement full time. I've been in that world for a couple of years now. I would say some of it's hereditary, right? Like my great-grandfather, my grandfather, on both sides, all law enforcement. So it's definitely in my blood. But I've had an opportunity to work in Maryland, Virginia, and now I'm a little bit further north in my current role. During that time, I took a hiatus, right? And I ended up pursuing my Master's of Divinity at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, which is in Louisville, Kentucky. So my wife and I, we had an opportunity to be out there. And I had an opportunity with that to plug into some of the churches and later on work in international missions. And I can always explain what that looks like more. And now I'm back in law enforcement. I absolutely love my job, but there's just something in me that's missing. I feel like there's an opportunity to dig deeper, something to pursue. And just again, give background. My grandfather worked for the Coca-Cola company, was a broom sweeper in a warehouse, and worked his way all the way up to leading marketing for all of New England. And then my dad, again, came up kind of in the same realm, but for a different Fortune 500 company. And so there's a part of me that knows that's in me as well. And again, I just want to conquer problems, want to deal with people, but I want to take it on in a new function. So that's a little bit about me.
Fantastic. What a great story. Wow. And really well told. I'll say, like, first piece of feedback is that you're presenting yourself already as a really MBA ready. You've got a great story, you're relaxed, you're telling it with authority, it's compelling. And I can already see what something that was really obvious to me when I read your profile and the form you submitted, that you're very much someone who's organized to serve his community. That just came across, like, from top to bottom in everything that you had to say about yourself, everything about your resume, all the choices that you've made. You're clearly someone who, sees himself as a steward and a leader in his community, and business schools are going to really respond to that. You can't fake that. You can't pretend to be that kind of person when you're not, but completely throughout everything about you, it's really clear that that's the kind of person that you are. And the schools that you are targeting, Dartmouth, Tuck, Michigan, Ross, and Duke Fuqua, I can tell you've done some research, because those are all schools that really foster that stewardship mentality and look for members of their community who are going to serve others through their leadership. And I think importantly also build tight bonds within the community, which I can only imagine you've been doing as a law enforcement officer and very definitely as a minister. So you're already, like, a huge way towards making these schools really interested in you, just because you so clearly embody their values in everything that you've been doing. So that's part of this process that if you didn't have that at this stage, there wouldn't be much that we could do to help you. So good for you for having embodied those values so far in your life. That's great. So as I look at your profile, yeah, you're welcome. Sorry. Let me give you the chance to talk. Anything you want to say about what I just said?
No. I just appreciate the insight, and I guess I am hoping that I put my best foot forward. So thank you.
Cool. So let's talk through some of the pieces of your profile vis-a-vis what we know these schools are evaluating and what they're looking at and what they're looking for. And so the easiest one to understand really is your brain power profile. And so this is going to be your test scores, your GPA, any additional coursework, quant certifications, analytics at work. So I'm gathering from your transcript, both of your transcripts, you've got some solid grades. So I feel all right about your GPA. Your undergraduate GPA as a 3.35 is a bit below the average of the schools you're looking at, but that's kind of the most forgivable statistic. It's not something I usually worry too much about as long as you're in the range. And then your GPA in your graduate program is even higher at a 3.65. But my guess is that if I dig into those transcripts, I'm not going to see a lot of math in there. No. And probably not a lot of math going into your day-to-day job as a law enforcement officer. So talk to me about your test score situation.
Sure. So I am currently in the prep stages of the GMAT. I am not a typically strong, big test taker, right? I suffer from all the anxiety that most folks do. I have been working through TTP for the GMAT process, as well as some other resources, right? So the plan is to definitely take the GMAT. I'm trying to be really thorough, so I'm moving slow, but I'm trying to be methodical. And the goal right now, in a perfect world, would be to have everything complete so that I could apply by August and try to make the round one deadline. I've done a little bit of my research, and I do know that Tuck, at least in years past, for folks who have applied by round one, they let them in with a guaranteed interview, and I'd really like to bank on that. Mm-hmm. Same thing. I know that they do that, or at least last year did that for round two as well, which I believe is by December 1st or in that time frame. So worst case scenario, and I know your advice is always put your best foot forward. If that means wait around. So I'm prepared to do that. but my family's currently growing. We're in the process of gonna be welcoming a baby here shortly, and so I'm trying to do all of the heavy lifting now so that I can relax once that happens and just let everything fall into place.
Very wise, very wise. Yes, that'll be an interesting curveball in your MBA plans, no doubt.
Absolutely.
So great. So let me give you a little bit of advice on this test score. I think, first of all, if we had been having this conversation a few months ago, I might have told you to target the GRE instead of the GMAT. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of advice about that now, just in case the GMAT doesn't go your way. Okay. You always want to think about the role of the test as it's playing two different roles. One is it's giving schools an indication that you are ready to handle the work. And when they're looking at someone like you, they're going to see your undergraduate GPAs, your master's GPA, and they're going to see that you are effectively a person of integrity and of dedication and commitment. They're going to look at those factors, and they're probably then going to say to themselves, all right, like this guy's going to be fine. We're not worried about him dropping out of school, even though maybe his math isn't as fresh as we might prefer. So to that end, you don't have to have these schools' average test score to be a viable candidate. In our experience, our candidates who are coming from public service backgrounds like military, even sometimes nonprofits, government, and law enforcement, fire, they tend to have weaker test scores, and that's okay for schools because you have other qualities in your profile, yeah, exactly, that demonstrate that, you might not be the best test taker, but you're going to be a solid business leader. And that's really what this is about for them. Okay. So that's one role the test is playing. The other role the test is playing, unfortunately, is helping schools maintain their position in the rankings. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of annoying because the GMAT affects their rankings a bit more than the GRE does. Okay. And so this is, whenever I'm talking to someone that is telling me, I'm not the world's best test taker, I don't think I'm going to be beating the average, I always want to steer them more in the direction of the GRE because first of all, you may find that the GRE is actually easier for you. The content is overlapping. So it's not like the work you've done with target test prep goes out the window. You if you're learning the math again, it'll still be useful in the GRE. But with a lower than average GRE score, you are in a less worse position than with a lower than average GMAT. So let me just show you this chart. Okay, so this chart, I don't understand why everybody doesn't like memorize this chart. So we have on our website the GMAT to GRE converter, which I think we have the only source to do that now because ETS took theirs down because it created a political fire with the GMAT. They're big competitors. But we, if you take the GRE score and convert it to a GMAT vis-a-vis the historical conversion rate, and you compare apples to apples, look at the difference here. Look at how much lower the average GMAT is, average GRE is for these top schools. And it goes all the way to the top. I mean, look, even at Harvard, it's a 37-point difference. Okay. So the reason this happens is because schools know that the GRE drag has a lower impact on their rankings. So if they want to admit a candidate that they love, it's easier for them to do that if that candidate has a weak GRE than if they have a weak GMAT. So this is just playing into their hand if you have a GRE. So my advice is stay the course, take the GMAT, don't bail on it. But if your first test or your second test doesn't go how you want it to go, take a practice GRE and see if you think you can do as well, if not better, in that test. Okay. And then go in that direction. Okay.
I do have a question for you.
Yeah, please go.
Sorry, not to interrupt, but I am curious. So I took the GRE when I had to process into the doctoral program that I was in previously. And I just kind of cold turkey went into that, took it, and hey, it worked, right? But I didn't study for it the way that I've been studying for the GMAT. With that said, I totally hear what you're saying. do you believe that the GRE scores are generally lower than the GMAT and apples to apples because the GRE is more difficult? I know you're saying that generally you don't think it is, but you just think it's just a different animal.
It's actually, no, it's actually easier because both tests are graded against the test taking population.
Okay. I
The
see.
test taking population of the GMAT is a bunch of engineers. The test taking population of the GRE includes some engineers and scientists, but it also includes philosophy PhDs, social workers, English majors, like people who are not comfortable with math at all and aren't even tracking on the math side. So over the years, the score inflation in the GMAT is really out of control. It used to be that, like, when I took the test, I got I can't even remember my score, my breakdown anymore, but it was still possible in like 20 years ago to get a 98th, 97th, 96th percentile on the quant. Now I think the highest you can get is 88th percentile.
Wow.
12%, something like, don't quote me on these numbers, y'all. It might be 5%, but it's somewhere between 5 and 12% of test takers are maxing out the highest possible quant score. That's not happening on the GRE side. So the test is different. You're dealing with vocabulary instead of sentence correction. You're dealing with these comparisons rather than data sufficiency. It's working different parts of your brains. It's challenging you in different ways. But for sure, the way the test is scored should not be harder. And if anything, it's easier. So you really want to take the test that you can do best on. And then if you know you're going to be below the school's average, better to have a GRE. Trust me on this. We give all of our clients this advice, and we've had so many people get into amazing schools with truly abysmal GRE scores. So take that to heart if you need it. And then I also want to share this little graphic here.
Right there.
So yeah, so here, let me do it this way. I think that's probably better. So you don't have a weak GPA, but you don't have a lot of quant in your background. You might have a weaker test score, so it's probably going to be a good idea for you to take some kind of quantitative coursework in preparation. So that's something you can start after you finish the test. The test is still the most important thing, but once you have the test squared away, taking something like MBA Math or a Berkeley extension program, or even HBX Core, something where you're being graded, you're showing them like, hey, not only am I so serious about the MBA that I'm starting my education now, but I can hang, like I can do math and I can get an A in a class. That will, at that point, then obliterate any concerns that you're not ready to handle the coursework. So so that's what I would say, to just square away. We're still really only talking about the first of these profiles. It's like there's so much more that goes into this that's much more important than your brain power profile. But we always have to start with the brain power profile, because once you hit submit, you can't alter it, and it is kind of black and white. So there are situations where someone who's knocking it out of the park on all these other 4 dimensions isn't getting in because of their test score or because of their GPA. Schools hate it. Schools hate it when that happens. But sometimes their hands are tied. So that's my advice there. Just keep going. It sounds like you're doing all the right stuff. So very, very, very happy to see that. Yeah, excellent. And whatever happens, don't let the test stop you. Okay. So like if you get to the end and it's like, I've got a 580 GMAT score and that's it, that's as good as it's going to get, still apply. Still apply to the same schools. One of your schools was the online MBA at Michigan.
Correct.
And the online MBA programs are a lot more forgiving about those statistics. So Michigan's average GMAT for their,
I believe it was like 680
program.
670.
Yeah, I have a list here and I can not finding.
I think their residential was like 710, 720.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's 680 average GMAT, which is lower. And so they're going to look at you and they're going to want to want you, and I think if they can, they will. So I think what we always advise is when you have something in your profile that's like a glaring weakness, like a weak test score,
Sure.
adding safer schools on the bottom, like still aim high, still apply to your reach schools, but then just make sure, give them the chance to say yes, right? Don't force a no without giving them the chance to say yes to you. But then plan for something on the lower end in case.
Okay.
In case
Wonderful.
they have a problem with the test score. Great. Okay, so now let's dig into your career profile, because this is really where I had the most questions when I looked at your resume. No, it's just what most people find when they get into this moment is that their resume is sort of toilet paper and they have to start over. They have to start entirely over. And that's for sure. I mean, just look at your background, right? You've never had to present yourself to a business audience. So of course your resume is not going to be in line with an MBA expectation. But let me see if I can share my screen here and bring up your resume so that we can actually talk through some of these specific aspects.
Perfect.
So I noticed that your resume has the name at the top, which is probably the person you got the template from and that just information into it. There you go. So this is on the back end of Microsoft Word. You want to go in and change the author, change the information in the Word document before you print it to a PDF, and then, put your name there so that, they know it's you. It's a funny thing. People don't realize that this happens when you convert a Word document to a PDF.
That is such a dumb mistake, but I appreciate you pointing it out.
Well, but everybody does it, huh? Everybody does it. It's these little things that you wouldn't think of unless you're spending your whole life inside these programs. Okay, so I'm always a fan of removing the qualifications when you're working on an MBA resume. Okay. So we'll just assume that you get rid of that. But now let's look at this work experience. So I'm thinking, if I'm the admissions committee, I'm looking to see that there's career progression, there's consistency, there's like a track record of kind of staying in one place, growing, advancing, moving up. And my read on some of this is that some of these were contemporaneous. I can see. Correct. So that's also something you'll have to deal with in the timeline, because it kind of looks, just at first glance, it looks like you've had 5 jobs, which isn't the best look. Sure. And it's going to beg some questions. So let's discuss this. So sure. I guess all of the missionary stuff happened contemporaneous with your law enforcement career, or were there times where you were full-time doing the mission stuff?
Sure. So yes and no. So law enforcement has always been full-time. I transitioned. So if you're looking at the second from the bottom, Prince William County, it says police officer 1. I was there, I was full-time, and then I transitioned to a full-time graduate degree. And that required us to move about 7 hours away. I had thought that I was going to pursue that online, was really blessed with the opportunity to go on a full ride scholarship, but it was contingent upon having a decent GPA, which I maintained. And then the other side was being residential and being full-time. So that's the reason for the move. Once I began my MDiv, I was pursuing that really full-time student. So I think the average is something like 9 to 12 credits. I averaged 18 credits a semester during my master's, and then continued on. One semester, I think I did 20 credits or something crazy. While I was doing that, I had that missions position that you saw there. I worked for the school. That was a part-time role that felt full-time. So I was there on paper 30 hours, but due to the international work that I did, I'm working all hours of the night. And so sometimes I had, 45-hour work weeks. Sometimes it was less. And then on the tail end of my MDiv and before I walked into my doctoral program, while still maintaining that missions position, I had the awesome opportunity to join a local church in the area, got to work with the pastoral team. And so it was kind of a hodgepodge of both. And then in the midst of all of that,
Mm.
COVID happens and there's just gigantic layoffs. So that's
Mm.
partially what you're seeing. So there's definitely some discrepancy.
Good.
That's what those are.
Yeah, so I think so it's always a really fun challenge to take someone's career and life and try to fit it all into one page. And that's what you're going to have to do.
Okay.
And so my feeling is you actually might want to have two sections in the resume, one
Okay.
being law enforcement career and the other being I'm not sure what you'd call it, spiritual career,
Sure.
mission career, give it a name, right?
Vocational ministry.
Yeah, vocational. So then, because also I think the vocational ministry, I guess, was less serious aspect of your career. It's closer to the side of volunteering, even though I guess you were paid for some of these positions. Does that fit with your experience?
Correct. So in the theological or vocational ministry world, they would look at my experience and go, wow, you were really plugged in. You did quite a bit, probably similar to consulting. If you're an MBA person, they're like, okay, you kind of been around the block a little bit. But I think you're right. I think for most folks who are not familiar with this world, they would look at that and say, you helped a lot of people. Okay, I don't get it, but cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the most interesting challenge for you is going to be to turn this into an MBA resume.
Okay.
And so your formatting can, we could change the format. I would get rid of all this stuff. I would structure this slightly differently. But I think the most valuable challenge for you is going to be drilling down into your experiences here and beginning to frame some of what you've achieved in language that will make more sense to a broader business audience, and importantly, someone who has no grounding in law enforcement or church planting residency or all of that stuff. So let's actually do one really quick example together here. I think this will be really helpful.
Thank you.
So let's look at your most recent role here as a state trooper.
Okay.
And so what are some of the things that you're doing in the community, thinking in terms of results? So like saving lives, preventing accidents, enforcing laws. Tell me how you measure your success.
Sure. So there's a couple different ways we could do that. One of them is just quantifying the number of engagements we have with the public. So it's kind of weird because I feel like I'm selling myself and at the same time don't want to be modest.
That's where you want to do it, is on the resume. Okay. So you have to fully pitch all of your awesomeness on the resume so that the interviews and the essays can be all about your character, your heart, your values. But if we can't see like, okay, he chose law enforcement, not what I would have chosen, but all right, that was his choice. What I want to know is, did he kick butt? Did he kick butt in his field? Did he do a really good job in his field? So now we got to talk about how you did a great job. That's what the whole resume is all about. So keep going.
Sure. So one of the ways, if we're looking statistically, I believe last year alone, I held the most traffic enforcement stops, which I know makes probably 98% of the population cringe, right? You're like, no. But, I gave a lot of warnings, but I had the most engagements out of my barracks, which means that I'm having that connection with the community. More on a positive note for what people would appreciate. I volunteer and I work with our recruitment team in an unofficial capacity. So I think coming up this week, I'm going to be at a local college, and I've traveled to a bunch of different events all throughout New England.
Perfect. So now we're getting into the substance of like, as a law enforcement officer, what kind of a guy are you? And so I'm reading between the lines, and it sounds like in the first category, you just kind of like work harder and smarter maybe than everybody else. It sounds like that. This is me. Don't take credit for that. I'm just trying to read between the lines here. All right. And then the second side, I see it's like you take greater responsibility for culture building and recruiting within the organization. So how would we measure those things? So the first thing you said is you had 98%. What did you say? 98% engagement?
I'm sorry. I was saying 98% of the population would cringe at the fact
would
that
not like that, right? So you had the most traffic stops.
Correct.
And why? Why do you feel like you had more traffic stops than everybody else? Were you working longer hours? Were you just more diligent? did you know the places to stand that was smarter? Like, what was the root of that success?
So I think I did not work more hours than most folks. I would say that came down to a want to or a desire. I enjoy that side of my work. I enjoy the what if of every encounter. I like the fact of holding folks accountable who are breaking rules. And at the same time, I really like extending that olive branch to folks who might be having a bad day. Like yesterday, I stopped a girl and she was crying and I'm like, what's going on? And we literally in the middle of a traffic stop had a little mini heart to heart for 2 minutes where she just told me about her anxiety and about what's going on at work. And by the end of it, those tears turned to laughter and she was like, hey, I really appreciate it. So knowing that could be my encounter during a traffic stop, or on the flip side, I could stop you for something ridiculously small and I end up getting a ton of illegal drugs that end up saving somebody else, down the line from overdosing. That's what I like. So that's a long answer to a short question, but
no, it's
it really is a hodgepodge.
But those of you, so this is like for the audience listening, you see how when we start to pick underneath the surface of the experience, how we really start to understand who this person is and how he thinks and what his values are. And so there was a lot of information in that. It's quite cool to me that you see your role as traffic cop as like taking care of your community in so many different ways. It's like both being there to make sure the rules are followed, but also to be kind when someone needs, to be like slowed down a bit and made to feel better so they could go forward more safely in their day. So you might frame this as like increased safety in my community by XYZ thing that you did that can be measured.
Okay, good.
Something like that. And so that's just one facet of it. Then you've got the recruitment. Then you've got things like, I'm guessing there were times where you had to pull a gun and manage a difficult situation. And my guess is that in those situations, you managed to do it with minimal casualties, minimal incident. And so that would also be something to highlight. I mean, I can tell that you're not the brute force guy. You're the guy who's going to like calm everyone down, restore the peace, sort of living up to the values that a lot of people might say are the intent behind being a police officer or a state trooper. And so you want your resume to really showcase that to the extent that to the extent that you can quantify it and measure it. And let me tell you, everything can be quantified and measured. It's not always easy to do, but it can be done. And so one of the things I want to offer you, we have what we call the Badass Resume Protocol.
Okay.
It's our online course to help you understand how to MBAify your resume.
All right.
And so we'll let you take that course for free as a thanks for being a Bob, for being a part of this, for doing this service to our YouTube audience.
Thank you.
And I think you'll find that enlightening, because part of what you're gonna find in the MBA is that you've already got a lot of the core leadership, creative problem solving, strategic, analytical thinking skills already from your education and from your work. Most people have already cultivated that kind of essential thinking and just orientation towards the world skill set pre-MBA. And then a big part of the challenge to go from pre-MBA to post-MBA is then up-leveling all of your communication skills and being ready to hang in a business environment and to make yourself understood, even though you are coming from a really different background from everybody else. And the resume is one of the places where you signal that to the admissions committee. So I think you'll enjoy that.
Well, thank you.
Program. Yeah, you're welcome. Let's take one more look at your 5 MBA profiles, because I think everyone watching would agree that, so we've dealt with brain power, which is still an unknown, but you're working on it. The career progress, to me, looks quite strong. So you've got these two sort of parallel paths, but in each path you were growing in responsibility, gaining more authority, presumably also, getting a raise, getting more accolades, awards, as it were. So I think the career progress, and this is why we spent all that time just talking about your resume, because that's where you're really going to show that is on the resume. So that part of your profile is super important. And it's especially important for someone like you where they're going to have no background. Like anything they're going to know about what it means to be a successful law enforcement officer or a successful missionary, you're going to have to show them, and you're going to have to do it in the resume itself, because they don't have that background. So that's why that piece is so critically important for you. And then we've got the school fit, passion, and character dimension. And like I said, I think everybody watching can already see there's a strong alignment with school values for the schools you're targeting. You're clearly demonstrating a series of passions in all of your life choices and in embodying the way you do your work. And you're also showing character, which is revealing that you're someone who actually cares about others and about making the world a better place. So from here, it's really just about you executing that in the application itself through your essays and getting ready for interviews. But my guess is that as long as you're able to get a test score that puts you on the game board, so you don't have to have the world's best test score, but as long as you have a test score that gets you on the game board, I think all of these schools are going to take you pretty seriously. And you're going to be one of those guys in the class where, everybody talks about, you're just like, yeah, there's a guy sitting next to me who was a state trooper. You'll be one of those like interesting people who adds a lot of, who adds diversity and spice to the classroom discussion, because you have had experiences that none of your classmates will have had. So I think you've got a really solid platform.
Wow. Well, I really appreciate that. That's really encouraging. I heard from all the reviews, and again, from watching all of your videos and all of your resources, which are super helpful to anybody watching. I've heard that you're a huge encourager, and at the same time, you're brutally honest, which I think is the perfect mix, and it's what you need. And so again, anything that you have in that ballpark, even on the brutally honest side, I want to hear. But I really appreciate that you're boosting confidence in taking next steps. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, the brutally honest stuff is, I already said it. You got to crush that test score or make it easy for them to accept you, even if it's weak.
Okay.
And you've got to get really good at framing yourself in a way they understand, because just let me put this back up here, because this graphic is so important. Most of the things that are going to determine your success, it is your job to communicate it in a way that they understand it. Your GMAT and GPA are numbers, but literally everything else hinges on how you communicate. And what I'm telling you is, you've got the substance, you've got the values, you've got the character, you've got the demonstrated progress that they're looking for, you've got the raw material, but that will all be worth nothing if you can't communicate it in a way that they can understand. So that's the challenge in front of you. And of course, this is why people ultimately choose to work with our team, is because that's like a complicated and challenging journey, and always easier to do if you have a buddy. So, but I think in terms of the substance of your profile, you have absolutely what it takes. And I think any school would really be lucky to have you in their community. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Awesome.
Yeah. I hope everybody watching really enjoyed this conversation. If you're rooting for Bob, please leave him a comment down below.
Yeah, please.
If you want to be featured in one of these sessions, you can fill out our form, which is also linked in the comment below. And we'll see you next week on MBA Monday. Drive safe, everybody. Don't speed.
Yeah, that's what needs to be said.
Bob will get you.
That's right.
Cool.